that's kind of what I mean, that's what draws the parents in here, and why I always think when I watch these movies that the toys represent parents, because the kids are growing up and they're moving on and they're getting interested in things that are for older kids, and they're becoming less interested in their parents. And the parents' job is to not kind of be jealous or envious of that affection like Woody is, who's upset that he's being replaced. Like Woody's realization is no, he needs to love Andy regardless of what Andy chooses, right? If Andy wants to play with Buzz, that's fine, right? Because he wants Andy to be happy. And Woody has to be selfless in that regard.
Welcome to Socrates at the Cinema, where every episode we look at one great idea through one great film by having a great conversation about the questions that define our lives. So grab the popcorn and let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Socrates at the Cinema. I'm here with my co-host for today, Austin Anderson. Austin, welcome to another episode.
Yeah, it's great.
Today we're going to be discussing something that'll be a little bit different for us. We're going to look at the 1995 film Toy Story. This is a classic now at this point of children's films, but it's a film that part of the reason it's a classic is because it sort of transcends age. It's one of those films that I remember I would have been in high school when this came out. And I remember really liking it even then. So even as sort of a jaded teenager, I thought this was a great film. And it has sort of stood the test of time in that way that people are still watching it. It's still very popular. We've had what we're now on the fifth sequel to it.
Yeah.
And there's been some degree of success with the sequels. Some people have argued that even like it's sort of a Godfather stage, that the second was maybe even better than the first. But then the third goes beyond Godfather, right? And actually becomes a really great film, whereas sort of the third Godfather sort of universally panned. So it has more
Yeah.
lasting power as sequels go, we might say.
Oh yeah.
So I always thought that was interesting.
Mhm.
We in every episode, part of the motif of this series is that we want to look at one film and one idea and discuss how that film deals with the issues around a single idea and how it affects or illuminates the things we deal with in our lives. And you and I chose a kind of abstract idea that I think maybe a lot of people probably don't think about very much, but makes a big difference in our lives. And that is the idea of same and other, or same and difference. Those are paired together as ideas that we have to deal with as a unit. We often talk about, I think we talk about things that might be the same or things that are different. But what's tricky is that things can be the same or different in different kinds of ways. And so I think one of the ways that we often get confused in this regard is that we don't always pay attention to the way things are different. And there's a lot of same and difference in this film that I think will really help us maybe come to grips with some of it. And one of the ways that we can talk about same and difference is if we focus on the question of difference, and that there's, broadly speaking, there's two different ways that things can be different. And they can be what's called different of kind and difference of degree. And so when things are essentially two different things, they're different in that way. Or things can be essentially the same, but just differ in terms of the various degrees of their qualities or characteristics. Right. So we might say that there's a difference. The difference between a square and a triangle is a difference of kind, because they're two different kinds of things. But the difference between an isosceles triangle and an equilateral triangle is an issue of degree. They're the same kind of thing. But also a triangle and a square are also the same kind of thing in that they're both sort of plane, like 2-degree enclosed plane figures. And so they share that. So there's different kinds of kindness as well. In that regard.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go too far into the philosophical arguments here, but on the question of same, this really comes up in our lives with the question of identity. And what does it mean to be the same person from one day over another as we grow and as we change, right? We can take the extreme view of like Heraclitus, the ancient philosopher, who said you can never step in the same river twice. And the reason you can't do that is, one, it's never the same river identically. And two, I'm never the same person. I'm always sort of changing and growing. And so what does it mean to say I'm me is like one of the big questions in philosophy, and identity. And we see that in we see these issues explode in Toy Story because there are identity crises that these characters have, and the question of what am I is
Hmm.
essentially what drives a lot of this plot. And so, where should we start then on this question? Maybe to help illuminate it, we can look at how does Buzz see him at the beginning of the film? How does Buzz see himself with regard to the other toys versus how the other toys, and in particular, let's say Woody sees Buzz? Like, what is the difference there?
Mm.
Would you say? How would you
Yeah.
explore that?
Yeah, because I mean, are they the same kind of thing?
Right.
Technically, they're both toys, right? But Buzz doesn't see it that way,
Yes,
right?
you might say
Buzz,
objectively. Yeah.
right? Yeah, Buzz sees himself as the real Buzz Lightyear, the
Right.
Space Ranger, right?
Right.
Uh, Star Command, and
Yes.
he's trying to stop the evil Emperor Zurg.
Yes.
And yeah, and when he introduces himself and who he is, right? Woody turns the box around and he's just reciting verbatim what's on the back
Right.
of his box, which
Yes.
he believes is a spaceship that's crash landed,
Right.
even
Yeah, in
though it's
spite of the fact
clearly.
that it's clearly cardboard, right?
Mhm.
Sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, right. He's delusional, and but he thinks he has these. Yeah, I wonder if he has memories, or at least he just has this view of this is who he is, and
Well,
um,
yeah. I mean, it seems like he has his identity is one that has been sort of given to him, we might say, from the outside, and that he has this. Maybe let's say he has memory, right? But it's a memory that has been created. They're not real memories, right? And that
mhm,
functions, and that's, I mean, that's a whole can of worms there. The degree to which um, and I don't want to go straight to application, but you can see where we're going is this question of how often do we define ourselves in terms of an external narrative that is imposed upon us,
yeah.
right? Because that's what he's dealing with,
Mhm.
right? It's
Yeah.
his that he was made this way to think and feel this way.
Yeah. Yeah, you wonder if all the other toys have to go through this experience too when they first come out
Yes,
of the box, right?
that's a great question. I would
They
love
always
for there to be
wonder.
a prequel.
Yeah, each
Like,
toy has to go through this at some point, but it does seem like it's a new thing, and I don't know, maybe it's because he has batteries. Maybe he might be the only toy that has batteries,
well,
and
no, like
there's
the
a
speak and
RC.
spell and RC. Yeah,
Yeah, sure.
yeah,
Yeah. There is something new about him though.
yes,
He's a very new kind of toy.
yes,
Um
yeah. So
Yeah, I
the
mean, you get
yeah,
that. It is a
go
good
ahead.
image too of just, the cowboy and this spaceman, just
Yeah,
this kind of transition in the '60s kind of thing of like
yeah,
kids.
yeah, but the movie doesn't take place in the 60s. That was one thing that
No,
that always
no.
kind of that always, even when I remember seeing it, is like, I mean, even a kid in the 90s, I don't think was playing with the Cowboys anymore. Like Andy is a real throwback kind of kid, right? Because I mean, there were digital
Sure.
toys when even when I was a kid, the new robot Transformers kinds of things were coming out in the 80s.
Yeah.
And so there is a little suspension of disbelief there in the sense that Andy is a real throwback kind of kid.
Yeah. Well, the toy is actually I think it might be in the second movie, but it's like a
Oh,
family heirloom. Like it's an old
oh,
toy, a very old
okay,
toy that they've
okay.
had. It's been passed down to
Yeah,
Andy.
but I mean, even the other ones though, right?
And
But I get, I feel like the Etch a Sketch and the Slinky Dog and Little Bo Peep, right? Those are all Mr. Potato Head. Those are all throwback toys,
oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
he
so
just has
they're
a very classic assortment of
yeah,
toys.
yeah. As opposed to me, and the only one that I could think that's more modern is maybe the dinosaur. As far as yeah, but I mean, the Speak and Spell is more new. Um,
Yeah.
so,
But
but I
I
don't
think
want to
if
get
you
hung up on
actually
that.
yeah, if you actually notice, I think there might be a scene where you can see under the TV there's a video game console too.
Oh, is
So
there?
so he
Yeah,
does have video games, I think, too. So he's not just playing with toys apparently.
yeah,
But yeah, so Buzz is a new type of toy.
yes,
He's the very exciting Buzz Lightyear, a toy that every kid wants. But he thinks he is a space ranger. So
right.
I mean, maybe and then Woody, we could talk about who he is. I don't know, like what his identity is at the beginning of the film, because he starts out as Andy's favorite toy.
Yep.
That's his identity. He is in charge. He calls the meetings. He has kind of like special information that he doesn't give to all the toys because they can't handle the news at the birthday parties today, that sort of thing. And so um, but yeah, he and Andy have a very special relationship. They always play together. And so and that is position in Andy's room that's unthreatened, and it's never
Yeah.
been something he's worried about at all. And so
Right.
his identity is shaken with the arrival of Buzz Lightyear. I mean, initially he doesn't think anything will happen, but then there's this montage where Andy redecorates his room, and he gets new bed sheets, and he starts doing different types of coloring. Instead of cowboys, it's now
Yeah.
spaceships and stars, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah. So maybe they
that's
should have
kind of
watched the maybe he should have watched the film Cowboys and Aliens. Maybe that would have helped to feed.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, Woody puts all this his identity in I am Andy's favorite toy, and so that
right.
he is no longer the same toy he was yesterday,
Or
because
at least yeah. Yeah.
he is now not the thing he thought he was. He is
Yes.
no longer Andy's favorite toy. He's been knocked under the bed, or he is no longer Andy's favorite toy. And so he's stored up so much identity in that now he has this disconnect. Am I the same toy that I was yesterday?
Yeah, but yeah,
Um,
but he recognizes himself as a toy. Like that's kind of maybe the difference between he and Buzz, right? His identity definitely is in a toy, and a special kind of toy. That yeah, you're right. His identity is wrapped around this idea that he is special in that way. Which then is, but Buzz doesn't, right? Buzz doesn't have that same identity. His identity, as we've talked about, is the Space Ranger. He doesn't see himself as a toy at all, right? And it's interesting then that the way that Woody channels his identity crisis is by trying to convince Buzz that he's not a space ranger. Like, why do you think that's the avenue,
yeah.
or why is it that that's the way this shapes out? What do you think? What do you think's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, he's just trying to be mean. He's trying to burst
Mm.
Buzz's bubble. He's trying to embarrass him in front of all the other toys, because all the other toys respect Buzz
Yeah,
and are
they're
impressed by him. And
yes.
they're buying into the illusion a little bit. For some reason, Woody's the only one who can see that Buzz didn't really fly around the room, that it was just kind of luck that he was able to fly on the ceiling fan.
I think maybe they recognize. I think they're more sort of willing to go along with it. Like none of the other toys believe he's a space ranger, but they kind
Mhm.
of, he's endearing to them, and they like that in some way. They're willing to sort of go along with the fiction. They're not bothered by it, right? Because maybe it's because they're not threatened by Buzz. Like they already didn't have the
Mhm.
place of privilege, right? And so
Yeah.
maybe they're more sort of secure with
Mhm.
just being a toy and not being the beloved toy, we might call it.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it is interesting that the way it seems like the idea, it seems like, is that Woody he's so shaken in this identity crisis, and he realizes how destabilizing it is, and so he lashes out at the thing that threatens it to cause it to have the same kind of identity crisis, right? Well, if
Mm.
I'm no longer the same being, I'm going to make sure that you know you're not the same being, and
Mhm.
that will hurt you as much as it hurts me. And the irrationality of that, of course, is that doesn't solve Woody's problem at all, right? Even
Right.
if he convinces Buzz that he's a toy, that doesn't change his place of privilege, and Woody is still sort of playing second fiddle to Buzz, right? But I think that maybe shows how these identity crises are so tied up in sort of emotion with who we are, that we lash out in ways that are irrational, and maybe we're blaming the wrong things for like this idea.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, at the same time, it's not maybe wrong for Woody to in some way to see himself as the favorite toy. Like he's not wrong
Mhm.
about that. Whereas
Yeah.
Buzz is wrong about his core identity,
Yeah.
right?
Right. And I think there's also just a theme in the film of change in
Uh huh.
general. And so
Yeah.
you have this subplot of Andy's moving. And I think a
Yes.
lot of kids go through moving. You also have the
Yeah.
absence of Andy's father too, and
Yeah.
so there's kind of a question of how that what that change was in his life, but
Hmm.
just children wrestling with change, and then
Yeah.
the times are changing. This moving from kind of the Western to that frontier to the new frontier, the next
Yeah.
frontier, the final frontier,
Yeah.
whatever you
Yeah.
would call it,
Yeah. And I
right?
mean, that's true,
And,
right? I mean, there were old space toys too. It's not like space
sure,
toys were a new
yeah.
thing, but yeah.
But right, but we have this like the new like even in film, I think we went from westerns being the most popular type of film to now we get sci-fi movies that are essentially
Yeah.
westerns set in space.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. Yeah.
have
I mean,
kind of like
that's what's, I mean, that's, I've always argued that like Star Wars is just, space opera. It's just Western. It's just a Western in space, right? It's, you got the
mhm,
gunslingers and all of that. They're just shooting lasers and fighting with laser swords instead of, Colts.
yeah,
um,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, so there's this change, this constant changing and wrestling with change and how that can affect your identity because
Yeah.
of this kind of how do we connect to who we were in the past to who we are in the present and how is
Yeah.
that the same person and yet different?
And what would have been I mean, this is something that we might think about, right? When we find someone who we see that objectively is sort of telling themselves a false narrative about who they are.
Mm,
I think there's one side in our culture that says, let them, right? It's
mm,
this, that there is no sort of ultimate, maybe objective identity that we have. It's all sort of external self-imposed narratives. And so if someone wants to live what objectively might be a fiction, what's the harm in
mm,
just letting them? Like, why not let Buzz just go on thinking he's a space ranger? Who's People
sure.
would say, who's that hurting?
Mhm.
Right? And
Yeah.
I know the movie doesn't address that question, but I think maybe, I don't know, does the film address that
Well,
issue?
yeah, I mean, it does a little bit. I mean,
Okay.
it's this idea of I think it goes back to a very classical idea, right? The Oracle at Delphi, this
Mm,
inscription like "Know thyself,"
mhm.
but it recognizes the fear of who am I gonna meet when I get to know myself? Maybe
Yeah.
I'm not the special space ranger I thought I was.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just a mass-produced toy, right? And so
Yes.
that's kind of
Yeah.
Buzz's problem is he is not he's very upset by who he finds out well, when he finds
Yeah.
out who he is. It's not as
Yes.
bad as someone who classically like Oedipus Rex who finds out who he is and it's a very disappointing
Yeah.
uh, realization and you know he can't he's got to stab his eyes out because he doesn't want to to
Oh, what a
see the
twist that would have been
sun
in Toy
right
Story
right
if Buzz
not
had
that
gouged
bad
out his eyes.
but he just finds out, right, that he's a nobody. I mean, but it's the same idea of that you have all your identity tied up into this image of yourself, and then to
Mhm.
find out to know yourself and find out that's not who you are. You're
Yes.
actually uh not the special thing you thought you were.
Yeah, and I think
So,
maybe, yeah, and it doesn't even have to be the special thing either. It can be just
mhm,
whatever you happen to be, right? When that itself gets destabilized, like that's problematic. I mean, I certainly have this thought as I've gotten older, and I'm my some of my temperaments have changed as I've gotten older, and I wonder if that, I'm a pretty different person to some degree, but it's just a question of kind, right? Than I was when I was, in my, late teens, early 20s. I like, I mean, for example, I tend to be sort of very introverted now, and I like, sort of calm, staying at home kind of thing. But when I was younger, I wasn't like that at all. Like you couldn't find me at home on a weekend or anytime there was any time off. I was always out doing everything. And so I wonder, have I become a new kind of person, or is that the person I always was, or does it matter? Right? The idea that we can change, but it
mhm,
seems like it comes down to this question of, am I changing in degree or am I changing in kind? Right. And I feel like maybe that's why it hasn't been destabilizing for me as I've gotten older, is
mhm,
because I realize it's kind of a degree kind of
sure.
thing. It's not, but it's not, I'm not sort of
Yeah.
deconstructing my whole, identity of my narrative of who I am, maybe. And that's
Yeah.
what these characters are going through. And that's why it's
Well,
so
yeah,
destabilizing for them.
for Buzz, it's he realizes he's a different kind of thing. But for
Right.
Woody, it's
Right.
a difference of degree. He realizes
Yes.
he's not as great of a toy as he once was. That's the kind
Yeah.
of change he goes through.
Yes.
Um, but
Yeah.
Buzz realizes he's a different kind of thing,
Yeah.
and a much more insignificant kind of thing. Not only is he not the greatest space ranger, but he is just that there's millions of him, and he's just a toy, which is even
Yeah.
less than, which seems so
He's not
insignificant.
saving, yeah, he's not saving the universe.
He's
Yeah.
not independent. He's not an individual heroic hero
Yeah.
who does things by himself. Probably he probably is
Yeah.
saving the world galaxy by himself.
Yeah.
Now he is he has almost like a master that he is designed to like serve. Right,
Yeah.
his job is to entertain a child. That's what
Yes.
he's been created for.
Yes. Yes.
Um, so he's lost all independence too.
Yes. And I think it's interesting, as you were saying that, one of the things that occurred to me is that I think that so Woody's attempt to uh we say wake him up or make him realize that he isn't the, the space ranger, and that he is a toy, well, that's done out of spite and malice and kind of wanting to hurt him. In the end, right, we can, and so for that reason it's wrong the way that he does that. But also at the same time, that's actually a, I would argue that's actually a good thing for Buzz, because
Mhm,
he's living under a false narrative that, I think, in the way I would see this as a false narrative of why it's bad, is because ultimately it hurts his relationship with the other toys, right? They're going along with it, right? There's that part of that montage is they're all working out, and they're all kind of buying into it. But there's a level in which the relationship with Buzz is never going to be as real and as deep, because there's always going to be that separation between what they believe Buzz is and what Buzz thinks he himself is. Right. And so they're
mhm,
never going to be able to be toys together. And so ultimately at the end, it's good that Buzz has this sort of destabilizing crisis of identity, because I think the
mhm.
argument of the film is that in the end he's happier, right? Recognizing, when I recognize who I am sort of objectively, and I live according to that kind of thing I am, I flourish in ways that I wouldn't flourish when I'm living under the false narrative of who I am. I mean,
Yeah,
I
that's
think that
true.
last scene at the end is really speaking to that, or those last few
Yeah, which
scenes.
that makes more sense, I think, why Buzz finds everything Woody has done forgivable, I think, because he sees what he was trying to do all along was
Yes.
ultimately for Buzz's good. And
Yeah, I mean, he
so
wasn't doing it for Buzz's good though, right?
right,
Yeah, but
but
it's like,
it
okay,
accomplished that. And
yeah.
so I think he was
Yeah.
able to forgive the selfish motives that were, and maybe even blame himself a little bit for how delusional he's being, like, well,
Yeah.
I guess if I really was acting like that, maybe it did warrant
Yeah.
some kind of malice towards me for being so
Yeah.
obnoxious.
Yeah, we might say what Woody intended for evil, God intended for good.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe, I don't you know.
Yeah.
It's sometimes, we can do the right thing for the wrong reasons,
Oh, yeah,
maybe,
yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
yeah. So yeah, so that definitely seems to be the case, in this regard,
Yeah.
that the
Well,
yeah,
there is an argument kind of from people about these films that Woody is the bad guy in each of the films because he's so petty, and
yeah.
he kind of has this pettiness in each film, and he's kind of whiny and always just he's not a very likable character when you think about all his actions throughout the film, but very selfish and
Yes, yes, right, and I mean, there's also the identity of his love crisis, right? Was it Little Bo Peep, is that her name? Right? That
mhm, Bo
that
Peep,
she's
yeah.
yeah, that she's also enamored with Buzz,
Oh,
and that's
sure.
that's kind of maybe a threat that he's clearly got a crush and a relationship on,
Mhm,
right? Which I still think is maybe my favorite line of the whole film. It's just
mhm,
that, and it's Bo Peep's line. She says, "I think I found my moving buddy." Right?
mhm.
That line cracks me up every time.
Yeah.
It's so brilliant and so subtle. I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
love
yeah.
it so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the voice performance there too helps it really.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah,
Mm.
and that is, yeah, and I think there's maybe part of the popularity of the film also is definitely the writing and the story. Um, so yeah, so I think that the issue then for Buzz is the question of, I mean, maybe we can figure this out. Maybe we can look at this. What the film suggests is, what does the film suggest then is the core of our identity? Like because certainly it has to do with the narrative, right?
Mm,
But both Buzz and Woody have identity breakdowns, but in different ways, right? Buzz's identity breakdown is a difference of his of kind, right? I'm not the kind of thing I thought I was. Whereas Woody is maybe more of degree. I'm not as special of a toy as I thought I was, but he always still thought himself as a toy. And so there, it may be that the identity crisis of the two characters is essentially different because it's a different kind of crisis. What do you think is the argument of the film as far as what is it that defines us, right? Because you do have, you know, a the philosopher John Locke argues that identity is stored in memory, and I am what I am as far back as I can remember, and that it's me, and that's what I am, and that as my memory shifts, if I lose part of the memory, then I lose part of who I am. But as long as there's continuity of memory, but that's not the issue for Buzz.
mm.
Maybe, unless he comes to believe it's that he comes to believe his memories about who he was is false, and that's the breakdown, or is it something else, or is it what do you think is the
Yeah.
difference
I
maybe
mean
in that?
I mean, maybe I'm addressing something else here, but I would say
Okay.
that it seems like their purpose is what defines them,
Mm,
at least, like, what their mission, like, for Buzz, he has one mission when he starts, and that he's never gonna accomplish. He can't
yeah.
accomplish his mission because he's pursuing a figment of his imagination, right? There's no Zurg. He's not going to, although Zurg does come out in the other movies, and we get to see him. But yeah, right. Like he's never going to accomplish his mission. He's never going to repair his spaceship. He's never going to repair the cardboard box, and it's not going to work because
Yeah.
he thinks he's one thing. He thinks he has a purpose that he needs to fulfill. But ultimately, I think too that they both come to realize that they have the same purpose. And it's in that moment that they both are able to accept the changes in their identity.
Mm,
And I think their purpose would be what the love of a child or something to right to essentially earn the love of a child or try and or do things for the good of their child.
yes. Yeah,
Um
you might do kind of a Westminster catechism for toys, like what is the chief
okay,
end of
yeah.
toy?
Yeah. Exactly, yeah.
What is the chief end of toy?
Yeah.
To love to love to love a child, right? Maybe
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
it.
even when the child is not interested in you. I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of the themes of these movies is the child because the enemy here for all of us with children is time. Children grow up. And that's kind of what I mean, that's what draws the parents in here and why I always think when I watch these movies that the toys represent parents because the kids are growing up and they're moving on and they're getting interested in things that are for older kids and they're becoming less interested in their parents and the parents' job is to not kind of be jealous or envious of that affection like Woody is, who's upset that he's being replaced. But like Woody's realization is no, he needs to love Andy regardless of what Andy chooses, right? If Andy wants to play with Buzz, that's fine, right? Because he wants Andy to be happy. And Woody has to be selfless in that regard. But Buzz also realizes he has that same purpose. He's a toy, and he just has to fundamentally realize that his job is to be a child's plaything, right?
Yeah.
He is a toy. That's what he's
Yeah.
there for.
But also that
And
there's nothing demeaning about that, right? That it's I think part of the issue is that I think at first maybe he sees this as he's not, I think as you said, he's not as special as good as he was. But in another sense, it's a different, I would say it's a different
sure,
kind of special. And it seems like the argument of the film is that we find our proper identity or our purpose and happiness when we do have the you know, the objectively right sort of narrative about who we are. Like it isn't, you know, they are toys, right? And that's the kind of thing they are. And if they try to live as something not a toy, then they're going to run into all sorts of problems because they're trying to live as a different kind of thing. And so that's why it's essential sort of to define what they are, and that they don't just get to make it up. Maybe.
yeah. That's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say we could have done the idea for this episode on happiness, maybe even that
Yeah.
the only way these toys will be
Yeah.
happy is when they live as toys.
Yeah.
Or at least live as what they are. And so Woody's trying to be more than he is. Buzz doesn't realize what he is, and I think they both have to wrestle with what they are, and what's truly going to make them happy would be to live selflessly. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's a message there to parents that when you're a parent, you need to be a parent essentially, and that's for the good of the child, and that's your job. And so I think about that a lot as a parent, just that I'm here for them now, and eventually they're going to grow up, and it's going to
Right.
be hard, but accepting that that's my role here, that's my function, and I need to fulfill that uh, in their life. So
And I think, yeah, I like that idea though, that the ideas of the film is that the the toys themselves are our parents in that regard. I think it's an interesting interpretive key to see in the films.
yeah,
Um,
I think it's why parents can watch it so
yeah,
easily too,
yeah,
is because
yeah,
they resonate with a lot of the
yeah,
toys and what they say.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and you can definitely see we see this played out with parents and the identity crisis maybe that comes of a parent who is their kid's whole world and then all of a sudden isn't, and then starts doing things that aren't in the child's best interest for the sake of being to continue being the kid's everything, right? This and so they stop being parents and try to start being friends, and I think ultimately to the detriment of the child, right? That's not that we go back to same and difference. It's not the kind of thing they are, right?
yeah.
I'm always very suspicious if a teenager says, my mom or my dad is my best friend. It's like, but they're not supposed to be your
Mhm.
friend, right? And that's
Yeah,
problematic for both of them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, another way to frame this too, I think a way the movie explains this is just the idea of flying, that Buzz thinks he's a flying toy. That's what his identity is at the beginning. Well, he doesn't think he's a toy. He thinks he can fly, right? Um, and then he has this when he sees the commercial, he goes to the top of the stairs and he jumps off to see, right? He thinks maybe just one more chance, can I fly? And he finds out he can't fly, and that's when his depression, his identity crisis really sets in, and but ultimately it's restored. And at the end of the movie, he does fly, or at least Woody
Yeah.
says he's flying,
Yeah.
and Buzz says, "No, I'm not flying.
Right.
I'm falling with style,"
Right.
and he accepts
Yeah.
that he can't fly. And in
Right.
that moment, he is flying. So it's kind
Yes.
of this idea of that he can only fly when he really accepts that he
Yes.
can't fly.
Yeah. I mean, this also goes to show how deeply ingrained our concepts of identity are, that when they're challenged, the lengths that Buzz goes to try to confirm, like he's willing to throw himself off the stairwell, which I mean but if he's which might mean that he could possibly die, right? He's willing to go that far. um I don't think he thinks it through that way, but that's the idea, right? That but he's willing to take that leap, right? And the leap ends up being wrong, but it's ultimately good for him. But that does show, the links we will go to when our identity is challenged. And same thing with Woody, right? The whole second half, third act is Woody really being despicable to Buzz, and he's trying to trap him. He tries to sort of trap him, but then ends up kicking him outside, and they go on this whole adventure. And even the other toys recognize that, right? That they're so ashamed of Woody and what he's done. So that does go to show how important this question of identity is to us. That when it is threatened, the links we will go to try to defend it, right? And I think that maybe part of the goal, you mentioned the Oracle at Delphi, and the goal is sort of philosophy and the kinds of things that we're even trying to do with this podcast YouTube channel, is just ask those questions that will help us navigate this some of these issues of identity and being open to being challenged about certain things. And do I have an openness to know who I am, or if who I am is threatened, am I simply going to curl up and defend it to the death, or am I open that maybe I'm believing something false? Maybe I have a false narrative that's keeping me from my purpose, depending upon what that is. And so I think that's part of the goal just of philosophy, is this openness to the nature of my identity and my purpose. I think this film is definitely a lot about purpose. And I do like the idea of putting together the chief end of toy kind of catechism and see what we
Mhm.
would come up with. That would be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Excellent. All right. Well, I think this was a bit shorter of an episode than we've done before, but I feel like we've covered, the main beats of the film with regard to the same or other, and I don't want to go further just for the sake of making this longer. I feel like this is a really fruitful discussion. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, I think this is good. Like a 90-minute children's movie. It could be a
Yes.
shorter episode. Makes
Yeah.
sense to me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but
yeah.
also I hope that this demonstrates that there is deep sort of philosophical tension within the film. And again,
Yeah.
that's part of what makes it a good film, is that it's dealing with a really serious issue that I think it can help us think through for ourselves in very important ways. So that's why I think it's such a great film that's going to, still be seen, hundreds of years from now. I think people are still going to be watching this movie for
Mm,
that reason.
yeah.
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 Excellent. All right. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for joining me, Austin.
All right.
All
Yeah.
right.
It's
Very good.
great.
So here's where we landed. Buzz Lightyear spent the whole film believing a story about himself that turned out to be false. And yet, the moment he stopped fighting it and accepted what he actually was, that's when he finally flew. Which makes us wonder, how many of us are walking around right now clinging to a narrative about who we are, our jobs, our status, our relationships, that might be keeping us from something better? The oracle at Delphi said, "Know thyself." But here's the question we want to leave you with. Is there a story you're telling yourself about who you are that deep down you suspect might not be true? And what would it take for you to let it go? Let us know what you think in the comments, and thanks for joining us. If you want to keep looking for the wisdom of the ages in the films of today, make sure to follow or subscribe to Socrates at the Cinema wherever you're listening. Pull up a seat with us to explore great ideas through great films by having great conversations.